Have you ever wondered what it takes to prepare for one of the hardest endurance sports challenges on earth, an Ironman triathlon? Well, you're about to find out. Today, I'm going to dive into my personal journey of preparing for my first ever Ironman triathlon. I'll talk about the challenges I faced, how I structured my workouts, how I felt, and what I'd do differently if ever I did it again. And hopefully you can use it as motivation or to reflect on your own training, or to see if it's a challenge you'd like to take on yourself. So the first Ironman distance event I ever did was called the Outlaw, which is held in Nottingham in England. And like all races of this distance, it involved a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile cycle, and a 26.2 mile marathon run. I did this back in 2014, shortly before I became a parent, so I had slightly more time and flexibility to train in those days. I'd raced a few shorter distance triathlons in that same year, and the Outlaw was supposed to be more of a secondary target for me. And this was a good thing in hindsight, because it meant I felt less pressure to perform on race day. So with a good foundation of triathlon fitness under my belt already, and with 12 weeks to go, I started training specifically for the longer distances involved in an Ironman distance triathlon. I'll give you an overview of what my training looked like, starting with swimming. So around this time I was going to a master's swimming group 2 or 3 times per week. The sessions started at 7 AM and were coached by an 83-year-old who was quite old school and who shouted a lot. And the workouts were typically between 2,500 and 3,000 metres, and they lasted an hour. They were aimed at swimmers rather than triathletes, and there were lots of sprints and other strokes involved. But it all still helped me become a better swimmer overall. I didn't ever swim any further than 3 kilometres in a session, which is 800 metres short of the race distance in an Ironman, but I felt like I'd be okay to swim the full distance on the big day. The Outlaw swim takes place in a lake, and as it got nearer to race day I did a couple of lake swims instead of my pool workouts. I didn't swim particularly far in those sessions, but it was a great experience of what wetsuit swimming felt like, and it helped to build my confidence. I usually cycled 3 times per week while training for my first Ironman distance event. I was working from home at the time, so in the week I would sneak out for an hour or two, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For the Tuesday ride, I'd just pedal easy for 2 hours. And then on Thursdays, I'd ride for about 90 minutes with some harder efforts thrown in. And if the weather was bad or I had too much work on, I'd swap it for an hour or 45 minutes on my indoor cycle trainer instead. And then on Saturdays, I'd do my long ride, which started off at around 2 hours 30 and then gradually built up to 4 hours over a period of 12 weeks. And I'd ride at a conversational pace throughout most of these long rides, although I did include a few 30-minute efforts at my target Ironman race pace. At one point, I did a 100-mile ride as part of a cycle sportive, which took me well over 5 hours. It was quite a bit longer than my other rides, and I did it to build experience and confidence. I aimed to do 2 runs in the week and 1 at the weekend. So on a Wednesday, I'd do an interval session that lasted between 40 and 45 minutes in total, and on a Friday, I'd do an easy 40 to 45-minute jog. To be honest, it was quite hard fitting my midweek runs in because my swim sessions were on the same day. And my swimming coach would be screaming at me to swim harder, and in the back of my mind I was holding back because I knew I still had an interval running session to do later that day. And that left Sundays, which is when I did a long endurance run. During these long runs I gradually built up the duration from 75 minutes right through to 2 hours and 15 minutes, all at a steady conversational pace. I can't remember how far that got me, but I know it certainly wasn't anywhere near marathon distance. But I felt that if I ran any further in training, I'd either get injured or I'd feel tired and sore for several days afterwards. And in some ways, that left me feeling a little undercooked for the Ironman marathon. But that's one of the most challenging things about doing an Ironman. It's that you can't replicate the race distance in training because the distances are just too far. So you just have to train your best, take a leap of faith and hope for the best on race day. I did 1 or 2 strength and conditioning workouts per week, depending on whether I had time to or not. And to save time, I usually did them straight after my 7 AM swim workouts because there was a gym at the place where the pool was. The only downside was that I was always really hungry and tired after my swims, so I struggled to concentrate during the strength workouts. It was only when I started taking an energy bar with me that I started doing the sessions properly. I only did about 25 minutes each time, but with a combination of strength machines and core stability exercises on the mats. With 6 weeks to go before my race, I started including brick workouts into my training schedule just to get me used to the feeling of running off the bike. This meant that I would run for 10 minutes at an easy pace after my Tuesday and Sunday rides. I also did a few longer brick workouts too, and they involved me combining my long Saturday cycle with my long Sunday run into one big session, plus a rest day before and afterwards. So I would ride about 3 hours with a few long efforts at Ironman race pace, and then I'd go straight into a 90-minute steady run off the bike. These workouts were really tiring, but they did provide a great opportunity to test out my race day gear and my nutrition. I learned a lot from these sessions, but 3 was definitely enough. With 2 weeks to go before race day, I started reducing my training volume so that I could recover from all the hard weeks of training and start to feel fresh again. I kept the same structure, but I just shortened all my sessions so that none of them ever left me feeling too tired afterwards. The other benefit of the taper phase is that it frees up more time, which I used to get all my gear ready for the Outlaw race. As it was my first Ironman distance event, I felt way more nervous than I can ever remember feeling before an event. And to make things worse, with about 40 minutes to go before the swim start, my bike tyre burst in transition. I decided to phone my wife for help, but I'd left my phone in the car, so I went looking for her, but it was so busy that I couldn't see her anywhere. So eventually I borrowed a phone, called my wife, grabbed the car key from her, then I jogged 15 minutes to my car, picked up my spare wheel, ran back to transition and fitted the wheel, and then I ran to the lake, dived in, just seconds before the gun went. Aside from all that drama, the race actually went well. The fact that I was so nervous meant that I paced myself conservatively throughout the swim and the bike to make sure that I had energy left for the run. And it worked. Despite a hot day, I ran a strong marathon and I didn't stop once. And the last 10 miles felt really tough, but my training had done its job and I crossed the line a relieved and happy man. So that's how I trained for my first Ironman, and I did 2 more in the following years. But on reflection, there's not too much I'd do differently if I were to do another one now. The only thing I might change would be to swim twice per week instead of 3 times. And that's because on race day, the swim felt like a very small part of the event. And yet in training, it took up a disproportionate amount of time and energy, particularly because I don't live near the swimming pool. But otherwise, it felt like the right balance of training for someone like me who worked from home. If you're interested in learning more about the race I did, I've included links to the TV coverage and the results in the description section of this video. And if you're considering doing an Ironman yourself, you should take a look at my inexpensive training plans. I've designed over 900 for every kind of athlete, all with rapid coach support for whenever you have questions. Just click the link on screen or in the description section to learn more.